Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Shaykh?
How's it going?
Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. My name is Naveed Hussain. I am joined by my brother, Shaykh Joe Bradford, our honorable Shaykh of Nikah Masterclass. And so we're just getting together on this random Tuesday night, inshallah, to try something out, something new, right? Something that we want to start something maybe on a monthly basis and kind of get an idea from all of you who are watching as to what you all are interested in learning about, right? MashaAllah, with Nikah Masterclass, we try to answer different questions. We try to hit different topics. And what we want to do with this IG Live, inshallah, the first Tuesday of each month, is hit topics that are relevant to our audience, relevant to the Muslim community, and use today especially kind of as a kickoff and as a pilot to answer some questions, get a feeling for what our audience and what the community is looking for, inshallah. So that's kind of the goal, the intention, inshallah.
Perfect. Yeah. Honorable Sheikh residing.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, that's the idea. I think one thing that that we've seen is a lot of people have questions that kind of only come up in the moment, and maybe a lot of those questions are on a particular topic. So we would like to hear from everyone in the comments, and I've also provided my anonymous feedback link in the comments as well, if you don't feel like putting your name out there to ask a question. But I think that we want to, number one, open the door and the floor for Q&A today about things, and then number two is hear from you guys, right? Like what are the topics that if we were to do a lecture series or a monthly or bi-weekly event, whatever it might be, I think monthly would probably be better so we can plan. What is it that you guys want to hear from the most?
Alhamdulillah. And actually, Sheikh, before we start and field issues and questions from the audience, I actually had a question myself, and something that I've been seeing around more and more is that people are talking about the word nikah itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they're trying to do is break down the word into its literal meaning and basically trying to boil down nikah to that, right? So, for example, it's commonly translated as, let's say, sexual intercourse. Nikah means sexual intercourse. And therefore, the conclusion that people are reaching is that the purpose of marriage and the only result of marriage is sexual intercourse. And so I guess my question is that a fair assumption? Is it fair to break down a word and make that the meaning of an institution? Or is there more to it? Looking beyond the etymology, looking beyond the fiqh, looking at the sunnah, is that a fair boiling down of the term, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I mean that's. I haven't come across that conversation myself, but I could imagine that it would be right. I don't want to delve too much in what the ulterior motives might be about trying to have that conversation. But the very first two texts that popped up in my mind when you said that, essentially like restating it for everybody, make sure that I understood you correctly. People are saying, well, nikah is only about sex, and therefore that's the core issue of marriage, right? That's all it's for. Yes, nikah, one of the connotations of it is sexual intercourse, but it has more meanings in the Arabic language, etymologically. And then also, we have to remember that a word can mean something in the Arabic language and then be assigned a greater meaning in the Sharia. For example, the word salah was not a commonly used term before the time of Islam. And some scholars have said it even was used for something like the sweetness of an experience, coming from the word salween. But that doesn't mean, or that it means dua. But no one can come and say, well, as long as I enjoyed the experience, I've prayed. or as long as I've made dua, I've prayed. Because salah now in Islam has a meaning that has pillars, obligations, sunan, and specific conditions for its validity or invalidity. Similarly, with nikah, the same thing. So when you mentioned that, the first two things that popped up into my mind was one ayah and one hadith. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ahzab, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, idha nakahtum al-mu'minat. O you who believe, when you have nikah of the Muslim believer, the believing women. ثُمَّ طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ. Then you divorce them. But what's the kicker here? مِنْ قَبْلِ أَن تَمَسُّوهُنَّ. Before you touch them. So the concept of nikah being complete and contractually valid and being a relationship based upon agreement and contract and consent before sexual contact is by the text of the Quran, right? فَمَا لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ عِدَّةٍ تَعْتَدُّونَهَا. So, this goes into the issues of iddah, right? Is there an iddah if there was never any intercourse? But just because there was no intercourse does not mean that there wasn't a valid nikah. Why is that important? It's important because the reputation of both the man and the woman are on the line. Were they involved in something that was illicit, or were they not? Was it akin to simply being a boyfriend-girlfriend situation, right? Or were they taking a solemn vow to be dedicated to one another? As the Prophet ﷺ said, and we're coming up on Hajj, and he said in Hajjat al-Wada', he said, أَخَذْتُمُوهُنَّ بِكَلِمَةِ اللَّهِ or أَخَذْتُمُوهُنَّ بِأَمَانِ اللَّهِ وَاسْتَحْلَلْتُمْ فُرُوجَهُنَّ بِكَلِمَةِ اللَّهِ. That you have taken them with the security of Allah, and you have made permissible intercourse. You were made permissible intercourse with them with the word of Allah. So there was a process of safety and security, of permission that happened before the intercourse. So if intercourse happened, it would be sifah, it would be fornication. It wouldn't be nikah. But going back to the purpose of it, like for example, the other text that came to mind was the hadith that's found I believe it's in the Sahihain, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ya ma'shar al-shabab, man istata'a minkum al-ba'ata falyatazawwaj, فإنه أغض للبصر وأحصن للفرج. ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له جنة." أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. O gathering of young men, whoever has the capability from you should marry, as this is more protective of his sight, of what he looks at, and more protective of his privates. And whoever does not have the ability, then should take to fasting, because it will be a shield for him. So the idea that marriage is equal to physical ability and thus sexual intercourse. Again, in this text, we mentioned the ayah. Again, in this text, the word al-ba'a literally means like the physical proclivity to procreate. But it can't mean that here, because every single young man has the physical proclivity to procreate. Like every young man can go out and do his business, right? But that's not intended. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that when they marry, then there's going to be certain things that result from that. You're not going to be looking at what is haram. You're not going to be approaching what is haram. And if you can't, so his negating the possibility means he wasn't talking about simply physical ability. He was also talking about being able to support a wife. If you cannot, and you still have this physical ability, then you need to fast. So the contention that it's just about intercourse, I think we don't even find this amongst the Salaf. Like Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he was asked about an elderly person who's gone beyond the age of sexual desire? Should they marry? And he said yes. And someone said, well, why would they marry when like there's nothing that they can do? And he said rahimahullah ta'ala, something to the effect of ألا يحب أن يكون له صحبة, doesn't a person like to have a companion? So there are meanings beyond just the intercourse. And هو الذي what does Allah say? اللهم صل على محمد. He says هو الذي جعل لكم هو الذي جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها. I'm sorry. هو الذي خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. It is He who has created from amongst yourselves spouses, so that you may find tranquility therein, and place between you love and mercy.
SubhanAllah.
So here are three things that are beyond sexual intercourse: tranquility, love, and mercy. Lots of people are in highly sexualized relationships, both married and unmarried, that are not predicated on any form of tranquility and any form of peace and any form of mercy and any form of love. It is I tell people all the time. A good relationship, I didn't tell people, I tell young men this all the time. A good relationship is 10% sex, 90% everything else. A bad relationship is 90% sex, 10% everything else. So if you find yourself in where your relationship with somebody is predicated solely on a physical desire, it's a very deadly formula for your future.
Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah. I'm not sure if you have any questions coming in from your side, but I'm being a little selfish here and kind of asking my own thoughts and my own things that I've been thinking about. Something that I've been thinking about is, we are a balanced nation as it relates to many, many things, beliefs, actions. And I almost think, or I've been contemplating and wanting to ask, I think that we kind of have that same thing when it comes to marriage, right? When you look at the Western concept of marriage, till death do us part, and on the other extreme, you look at just free hookups, it's almost like Islam, again, is in the middle of that, in the middle of those two paths of how you can have relationships with the opposite gender, totally free or totally bound, and your name is changed and your property becomes one, and all of those implications of that oneness of the Western concept of marriage versus, just hook up with whoever you want, one night stands, that type of thing. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is that, do you see that we in the West have kind of moved too much to the Western concept of marriage, and how do we bring our concept of marriage back to the middle path? If that's even the right framing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one to say. Like when we say like the Western model of marriage, people commit zina all over the world. I mean, people are involved in illicit relationships all over the world. I think the difference is that they are societally more acceptable in some places and some places not, right? But I think one thing that's really important to remember is that everything that Allah commands us to do is predicated on it having some form of welfare and utility for us, benefit for us, and everything. And that benefit might be a pure benefit, and it might be a predominant benefit, right? So, for example, when Allah commands us to be good to our parents, right? That's purely beneficial for us, both spiritually and socially. When He commands us to be good to our neighbors, that's predominantly good for us, because our neighbors might not have the relationship with us to reciprocate, right? But there's a predominant good that comes out of that. When He forbids us from something, it's because there is a pure harm or a predominant harm in that. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, forbids us from killing, it's because there's pure harm in killing someone. When he forbids us from alcohol, it's a predominant harm that he's forbidding us from. Why? Because he himself says, فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. In it, in gambling and in alcohol, are great harm and benefit for people, but the harm outweighs the benefit. So here, the harm is predominant, meaning that somebody could come and say, "Oh, there's good. Oh, there's good. Let's take it back to the marriage thing. Oh, there's good in getting to know the guy and living with him, and trying each other out beforehand, and kind of knowing." And you can say, okay, there might be some benefit that you get in that, but the predominant situation is that it will be harmful because you're not thinking of all of the future things that come out of that. You're not thinking about, I've talked to so many people who said, yeah, I made the mistake of trying to be too serious before there was an actual commitment. And now I'm stuck with this guy who, is a bum, refuses to pay the bills, treats me like a roommate, and he's already gotten what he wanted. So they figure out the shallowness of that when it's too late. So I think regardless of what paradigm we frame it through or what social set of social values we frame it from, we bring it back to an Islamic framing. It's, do you believe that what Allah has told you is beneficial for you or not? Or are you just going to follow your own desires?
Alhamdulillah. So for those who are listening, inshallah, please feel free to submit your questions. We kind of want to get an idea of certain topics and questions that the audience is interested in and our community is interested in. So whether you're listening from YouTube or from Instagram, feel free to post your comments and we'll try our best, inshallah, to answer those questions. I'm not sure, Shaykh Joe Bradford, I know you had your private link as well. I'm not sure if you've gotten any questions.
Yeah, I have actually. So there are three that are on the Instagram comments. So let's start with those. Someone asked, is it a bride's right to ask for a banquet hall if the husband refused? And I mean, I don't know if it's her right to ask. She certainly can ask, right? But then again, that brings up the issue of kafa'a, of compatibility, right? And I think that, do you have expectations about what you want in your wedding? And are you marrying the person that can meet those expectations or not? And are you brave enough to walk away if those expectations aren't met? Or are you being overburdening with those expectations? Let's face it. I think Naveed, you're in Chicago Sharif.
Yes, I am.
I mean, the biggest weddings that I've ever seen is when somebody from Chicago marries somebody from Houston.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, I think one time somebody got married and they rode into the banquet hall on a horse. With a sword in hand and a imama and all of that. And so I think having an expectation of wanting to have, yes, a dignified, joyous occasion is important, but also tempering that with not just trying to keep up with everybody is really important as well. Here's one that's for you, right? Good evening. Person is wishing you a good evening.
Yes.
In an Islamic point of view, how should the prenup for a woman come into the marriage? How should the prenup for a woman be who is coming into the marriage with assets?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty simple that a woman's prenup or any Islamic prenup really should outline that any assets that you bring into the marriage, any assets that you earn during the marriage should be yours and yours alone. As a Muslim woman, your money is your money. Your husband has no right to it unless, of course, you want to give sadaqah. And so the prenup would be very clear to outline that any of the assets enumerated herein and any future assets that I acquire in my own name, if we were to divorce, would belong to me. And so the typical prenup that I recommend and that most lawyers recommend is a mine, yours, ours prenup, right? What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. And if we decide to buy something or own something together, whether that's a joint account, a joint property, a joint debt, only that asset or that account would be divided upon divorce. Otherwise, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. So I would absolutely recommend that that's a provision in your prenup. And also, kind of adding to that is securing your mahar as well, right? Only, I think, New Jersey and Michigan might be the only states that will enforce a mahar contract. The other 48 states typically will not. So you want to make sure that in your prenup that you actually outline the mahar as a term in your prenuptial agreement so that a court will actually enforce it.
So if I understand you correctly, a lot of people seem to make the mistake of, well, I don't need a prenup because I have a nikah contract.
Yes.
Or my parents wrote the mahar down and everybody was there and signed and agreed. And
yeah,
that's what you're saying is that's not in and of itself a legal document.
No, it typically is not. Like I said, in 48 states, that would not be considered a legally binding agreement. Most states are going to use the factors to determine whether it's a prenuptial agreement. And in most states, for a prenuptial agreement to be strong, you need financial disclosure, you need attorneys on both sides, and you don't want to have duress, meaning that the parties shouldn't feel like they're under pressure to sign this contract. And the funny thing is that when you sign these nikah contracts on the day of the wedding, all three of those factors are in play.
So I was like, I don't know, I've never seen this before, but I'll sign it because I want to.
Yep.
I want to marry this person.
Yeah, and everybody's here from out of state. Everybody's dressed up. Yeah, I'll sign it. Don't worry.
Yeah. So here's another one. And this came through the NGL Nagalai link. How can we separate between Islamic marriages and Western marriages? I'm thinking they're talking about legally. I feel like women these days want to take both benefits of each side, being independent, but also wanting the man to provide.
Wow, many layers to that. Again, and it's going to sound like a broken record, but I really think that if you're going to get legally married and you want Islamic law to apply, the only way that's going to work is with a prenuptial agreement. There's no way, and I would not expect that if you're going to get legally married, meaning you get a license from the state, you get married and you do the whole shebang, that at the end of that marriage, that Islamic law is going to apply. 99%. I've been doing this for 10 plus years. I could name like a handful of times where Islamic law is voluntarily being applied at that point. So if you want an Islamic marriage, then get a prenup. If you do not get a prenup, then have the expectation that it's going to be a quote unquote Western divorce. And so one thing that, is very interesting is that maybe I disagree with the framing, but I don't disagree with the idea of trying to get best of both worlds, right? And so it almost makes sense that if you're going to have a Western legal marriage with American law, it makes sense for both parties to work, or else the result may be very different than what you expect. And if one of you is going to be or if the wife is going to stay at home, that really needs to be discussed. And you really have to understand the implications of what that means at the time of the divorce if you do not have a prenup.
Right. And I'd say that's very important for both the man and the woman, because what I've seen is that there's a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of times people come to a realization way too late about what's theirs and what they deserve. And, as another brother who's a lawyer, he told me, he said, this is not Law and Order. Like, this is not TV.
Definitely not.
People have these ideas about like what they're going to get if they go through a divorce, both men and women.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the time men think that they're always going to be screwed over. And many times women think that they're going to fleece their husbands. And it's never that cut and dry.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're getting married, I mean, I agree. I would, to add to the legal point that you mentioned. I say, men, you need to be brave enough to actually express your expectations.
Mm.
You know, you can't be like, I'm going to be the man. I'm going to take care of the home. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then if she says, "Oh well, what if I work?" You go, "Yeah, no problem." Right? No,
Yes.
you if you have the expectation that if she works and she's taking away from the family, that she contributes to the family, that's different than saying, "Hey, I don't care if you work," and not expressing what that expectation is.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
there is a reasonable expectation that if somebody it has a responsibility in the family and they can't meet it, and the other person has to take up for that, that there's some form of compensation.
SubhanAllah. And I can see a lot of brothers maybe feeling a sort of resentment that if they do not have that conversation, and there's certain expectations that are out there that, okay, if quote unquote, not I'm letting you, let's say I'm letting you work, and now you're out of the house for 8 hours at a time, and your bank balance is rising and rising, and here I am struggling, day in and day out, trying to pay the bills, living paycheck to paycheck. If you don't have that conversation, I think it's your fault. If you're feeling that way and you haven't had that conversation with your spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of this goes back to uh, the bad communication and unspoken expectations,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is people not knowing how to communicate because they don't come from families that had good communication,
Yes.
not taking it upon themselves to say, look, my mom and dad are not getting married, I'm getting married, so I'm going to communicate these things, and then wondering why things went bad. It's like, you're an adult. Like, you're yes, your parents can do the back and forth for you if you're from a culture that does that. But in the end of the day, it is you, an adult, who's signing on the dotted line, right?
100%. 100%.
We have a couple of other questions, from a few from Instagram and a few from here, and we've got somebody who's, mashallah, is writing a novel here inside of the anonymous one. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to this. Um,
Yeah, and there's some on YouTube as well.
yeah. So the question here is, the next question here is, can you talk about combating anxiety regarding scouting spouses, especially for sisters?
Hmm.
I mean, um, I think a lot of issues of anxiety go back to issues of self-worth.
Hmm.
You know, how it can be what's the word I'm looking for? It can be demotivating to feel that you are constantly being rejected, or you're rejecting others. Like, why
Mhm.
can't I find somebody good enough? Why am I not good enough? And in both of that, there's a feeling of worthlessness. I'll leave everyone with a statement that one of my mentors, Brother Naeem, he told me. He said, when Allah wants the right person, He will put them in your life. Everything else before that is protection.
Hmm.
So you have to stop thinking that was the right person for me, but somebody else messed it up. Like, there's an author from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu in Kitab al-Arsh by Dhahabi, and he says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala notices his servant trying to gain some position or do some business or gain something of the dunya, and he knows that thing that servant wants will be harmful and bad for them, he sends his angels to that servant and says, take that away from him. And the man sits there saying, so and so is jealous of me, so and so messed it up for me, so and so got in the way. And he doesn't realize that it was the pure it was the pure uh, destiny and intent of Allah for good for His servant.
Hmm.
So when we have greater iman and qadar, it makes it easier to go through that. We don't have to be as anxious.
Alhamdulillah. I have an easy one here. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Could wedding ring count as the dowry?
Well, yeah, if you accept it as that, yeah, yeah. I mean, the dowry has to be something. The mahar, sadaq, whatever word you want to use for it. Are there other words? Mahar and sadaq, right? That's it.
Yeah, I've heard dowry, mahar.
Yeah. So bride purse, I think. If it anything that can be bought and sold can be the mahar. So if it has value and it could be exchanged, then it's valid as the mahar. My only thing is make sure that you're okay with the value. Like don't like go crazy, and also don't devalue yourself. Oh, I just want a flower, and then the flower dies. You know. But if you want a ring, make sure it's something that's that's of value to you. The point behind the mahar is not to become like a parallel support system, but it should have value that a woman can use at some time, and it should be like an avatar for the man's ability to care for her after marriage. And the problem is when you shoot too high in the mahar scale, you actually force the guy to go into debt, and then you wonder, why isn't my life as glowing and wonderful after I got married as I thought it was going to be? He gave me this giant rock on top of a gold ring, and it's because he's still paying the debt. Someone asks here, is it unreasonable to request your potential spouse to live with your parent if they are single and have no caretakers as a sister? So this is a woman who has a parent who can't take care of themselves, wants to marry, and is it unreasonable to say that I'll marry, but I have to be able to care for my mother or father? What have you run into in that regard?
I usually see it from the other way, where the guy is saying that, hey, I want to get married, but we have to take care of my parents as well, and we're going to live with my parents. I have run into the situation where
and his parents are like decrepitly old, like 40.
Yeah, exactly, because they're desi. Sorry, so
you said it, not me.
I know, exactly. Was it so the wife is asking this question, or the husband?
Yeah, the woman's asking this question. She's saying, I have a parent who has no caretakers. I'm their only caretaker. And could I get married but tell my spouse that my parent has to live with us?
I mean, it's up to the guy, right? It's up to the guy if he wants to live in that type of situation, and is the financial side of that also going to fall on his shoulders? Is he ready to handle that? Are the communication styles and the culture going to be suitable for your parents and the guy to get along with each other? A lot of times guys really enjoy their freedom, right? If the mother-in-law of or the mom and dad of the wife is now going to be asking questions about where you're going, where you're coming, start interfering in their marriage. I mean, I can see it causing problems just purely from a logistical side. And I've seen it many times in the cases that I deal with. So again, I know it's kind of an exceptional case where they can't take care of themselves. Again, I think from my perspective, is really just up to the guy. I'm sure there's much more you can add from the Islamic side, or if there's any fiqh concerns.
So yeah, I think that the issue of support is the important thing, right? You should agree to. I think it's important to do ihsan to the other person's parents, right? As wa ahsin kama ahsan Allahu ilayk, and be excellent as Allah was excellent to you. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that لا ينبغي لأحدكم أن يسب أباه. It's not befitting for one of you to curse his father. Everyone said, well, how would one curse their own father? It's like unimaginable. He curses someone else's father, and so that person curses him. And the inverse of that would then be, if you want to be good to someone else's father or good to your own father, you would be good to him. So being good to those people that your loved ones love and respect is a form of ihsan to them, right? من أبر البر أن يوصل أحدكم ود أبيه. From the best the best type of righteousness to your parents is to connect with those that he loved or he or she loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the flip side of that is that, well, if I want to be good to my parents, I should be good to my wife's parents. If I want to be good to my husband, my parents, I want to be good to my husband's parents. But there are obviously things like be a man, be a woman, say, hey, this is what it's going to cost. I'm going to be, when you get into a marriage, you are no longer a child, and this is a big problem in the community. There's a lot of people infantilizing themselves, and you'll always be someone's son and daughter. You will not always be a child, and so you cannot have the same dedication to your parents that you had before you were married, because now you have other responsibilities. So if you can't juggle those, then yeah, it might be better not to do that.
No. I have a few questions coming on, Sheikh, if you have.
Yeah, there's there's a number of questions that have come through. What's the right way to approach or get to know someone without falling into haram? I'm gonna say that if you're interested in someone, then just say that. Just say that I've noticed you. I'm interested in you. I'm not interested in anything other than marriage. What would I need to do if would that interest you, and what would I need to do to make that happen?
And you would see it from the guy's perspective and the girl's perspective?
Oh yeah, I mean from both, right? And everybody says, well, aren't you going to go too far online? Aren't you going to do this? Aren't you going to do that? You're both adults. Like I'm always strange. It's always strange to me that people are like, I was like taken advantage of over DMs. How? Block the person. Doesn't make sense. You as an adult, you have to bear responsibility for your actions. And if you're interested in somebody and you know enough about them that would say, yeah, I might want to be serious with this person, then take it to the next step of saying that to them, and then asking who do you need to contact for that, because it's very important that families know about what's going on, because if they don't, it only goes down a very, very bad road, and then you start to fall into haram. So don't go close to the situations that will take you towards the haram.
I have one here. Do you have a financial setup that you've seen work well with other couples where both husband and wife work with children, all while still fulfilling each other's rights, meaning splitting up certain bills, how to set up checking savings accounts, etc.?
Yeah, so I think that what I always recommend people to do is to always have like 3 accounts. You want a joint account for you and the family, right? So joint account, this is where money that is spent on everyone, it goes in. And then you want to have an account for yourself, and your spouse has an account. And the biggest problem that people make is, and men make this mistake mostly, is they think, oh, well, I'll just give my wife money. And I always give everybody this very simple example. Is let's say it's Eid, and you're like, oh, I just give my wife a debit card, to give her a credit card, to let her spend whatever she wants. And then you're doing the bills, and you notice that she made a big purchase for you. She's like, what is this Traeger grill? Like, I didn't order this. And you just ruined your Eid gift.
Yeah.
What is this watch? Oh, you just ruined my Eid gift. And then you lose respect, because you're like, oh, well, I could have spent my own money on that. Why is she spending my money on me? So each spouse needs financial autonomy. And this is not something that's foreign to Islam. I mean, Zainab, the wife of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anha, she was a business person. She did business in Medina. She made more money than Abdullah. She wanted to go and give sadaqah one time. Abdullah said, I think it's better if you spent it on the family. And she said, well, I have to ask the Prophet. Hadith is in Bukhari. She went to the Prophet and he said, Sadaqah Abdullah. Abdullah told you the truth. If you spend it on your family, it will be both sadaqah and a strengthening of family ties. So having clear ideas, like if you're going to share your wealth, there's nothing wrong with that as well. If you're going to conjoin your wealth, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Like a lot of people think, oh, we can't go 50-50. We can't go 30-70. Like I spoke with a couple today and the woman brought this up. I was surprised. She was like, he wants to give me half. I don't feel that's fair. Like I don't work. He goes out and works. I take care of the kids. I want to be just. So I said, okay, well, we'll discuss that at another time about what that means. But as long as you both agree, and he's like, no, I've agreed to this, right? As long as you agree, and that's clear, that's what's important, right? But as far as like, logistically, you want to be able to say, okay, I know like this money is mine. I don't need to like tell my wife about what I'm spending. This money is mine. I don't need to tell my husband about what I'm spending. But when we spend from the main account, that's when it becomes important to know, hey, I was supposed to pay the light bill, but you spent it on, something at Target, right? So having those conversations beforehand are really important, and coming to an agreement about, hey, which of us is good with money, which of us is bad with money. All of that starts with proper communication. So somebody said, Assalamu alaikum. My question is, if someone hugged a girl, that's body touching, even if they have clothes on. Is that zina or no? So it is not the zina that necessitates punishment, but it is zina of the touch, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah kataba ala ibn Adam haddahu min az-zina." Allah has written upon Ibn Adam, the son of Adam, his share of zina. So zina of the eyes is the look, zina of the hands is the touch, zina of the feet is walking to haram, zina of the ear is listening to the haram, right? So you should be very, very careful, and you should fear Allah about yourself and fear Allah about other people's daughters.
I had a question here. If I don't own any property or land or a lot of assets, I don't need a prenup, right? Prenups are only for people with property / a lot of money. I disagree. I think that you may come into a marriage without property or without assets. However, what a prenup is really going to discuss, and maybe in this particular case is going to be beneficial, is what happens to the assets that are being accumulated after marriage, right? So as you both progress in your career, or one of you is working, one of you is not working, how are those assets that are being collected, how are they going to be defined? Because if you don't define it, then you are letting your state define how those assets are going to be divided. Yeah. And I think, one issue when it comes to prenups and the law of the land and that type of thing is that you're really having the legislature, these, random people who go to Springfield or go to downtown and make up these laws that can change over time, right? Just in the last few years, you had maintenance deduction, right? Before you could deduct your maintenance from taxes, that changed. You went from no fault divorce to now no fault divorce. So basically, this is one contract that you enter into that can be changed by the legislature as you're going through it. You could be in a 20-year marriage, and the laws are changing at each stage of your marriage, which I think is ludicrous. So a prenup is going to allow the two of you to come up with your own laws and your own rules rather than the legislature dictating how your marriage works.
Yeah, I think if you don't solemnize your own values in a contract, it will be solemnized for you. It's just like having a will. If you don't have a will when you die, a lot of people do this. Oh, it's okay. My family will take care of it. No, they won't. Not in the United States. The government's going to say, we're going to take care of it. And it's actually quite fascinating that it's a complete, like the concept of sovereignty in governance and in politics, completely different Islamically. The essential sovereign unit of the Islamic nation is the family. The essential sovereign unit of the Westphalian kind of Western, what we understand as the Western, political order, is the king or the state.
The state, yeah.
Right. So, when there's a really interesting book I think everyone should read. It's called what is it called? It's called Mercy Work, I think. And it's about this group of people in Iran who's they're an official position. Their position is to work with the families of people who have been murdered to negotiate the blood money and the rights of the families and all this kind of stuff. But the point that I'm bringing this up for is because the essential unit here is the family, and then and then what the family represents of protecting the individual and their rights. So if you're not doing your part to protect yourself as an individual and your family as a unit, the state's not going to do it for you because they believe that they own you. Exactly. That's part and parcel of their political view of you. The only difference I think in the United States, as opposed to many other republics in the world, right, is that the United States said, well, we're going to give people the choice to participate in this or not. Whereas that's not the case if you're in, say, Argentina or France or Spain or many other countries that are built on this older type of political system.
That's interesting because that really, in America at least, that applies to your assets. You can get a prenup and that type of thing, but not your children, right? The children, the state still has the final word when it comes to your children.
Yeah.
The state is the absolute arbiter of what is in the best interest of your children, which is actually a very scary thing. And when you brought up this discussion, the book Impossible State by Professor Wael Halak came to mind, because he kind of talks about, the sovereignty lying in the state versus lying in the family and all of that. So that's a whole nother discussion, but that's always something I like to think about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Let's see what other questions do we have. If one asks for a mu'akhkhar amount, a delayed mahar of 30,000 to be granted in case of divorce, is there anything principally wrong with this if it is not financially strenuous on the man? No, there's principally nothing wrong with this. Now, I will alert people to what this means, because the mu'akhkhar is done differently in different places, right? So generally, anything that's named as a mahar is a debt that is owed by the man. So that debt might be due upon a demand when you ask for it. It might be due upon divorce, or it might be due upon death. And if it's only going to be due upon divorce, you need to be very clear about that. That needs to be in the nikah contract. It needs to be in the prenup, right? Because for example, I was speaking to one of the brothers from Jordan recently, and he was saying, like, the Sharia courts in Jordan, they will not take it as a given that it's part of the mahar. It will only be applicable in the case of divorce, and that's only when the man asks for the divorce, not when the women ask for a khula. Whereas in other places, they'll consider it to be part of the mahar musamma, the named mahar at the beginning of the marriage, and he'll be due for the whole thing. So here in the U.S., where we have a number of converging expectations of what is Islamic, it means that we have to be so much more clearer about what our expectations are, without, of course, being overbearing. So the sister's asking, if a man can foot this, then can she put it? Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing to say that she wouldn't be able to make that type of condition. A sister here is saying, how much is the average reasonable mahar here that you have seen, and how to ask without seeming materialistic? It's cultural. I'm not sure how cultural being materialistic it is. It's every culture has the materialistic bug. Naveed, what have you seen there in Chicago for muhur?
I mean, I've seen 11,000. I've seen 51,000. I've seen 101. There's always a one for some reason. um, and I think it kind of depends on what stage in the game the guy is, right? Me, you know, myself, I got married when I was 21, 22. My mahar was 3,000. I know a lot of 20-year-olds are kind of in that 7 to 11 range. I think more established are about 21,000. I've seen, 51,000, but to me that seemed more of a show maybe than actual intention of paying. But I think I'm looking at between 7 and 21,000 is kind of what I'm seeing.
7 to 21,000. I would say that's very close to what I've seen as well.
Yeah.
So I've seen it been stated like at the Katb al-Kitab, not at the Katb al-Kitab, but like at the Fatiha or at the Khatuba when there's like the proposal.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, our expectation is, like 7,000, 6,000, 5,000. And then by the day of the marriage, it drops to 3. and then when, like you go to the girl and you ask her, like if you're a witness or you're the ma'dhun, you ask her, you're like, I'm going to write this down, what, right? And she's like, just write 1,000. Right. Yeah. So yeah, she doesn't want to give the guy a hard time. Right. And then I've been to a wedding where a guy insisted. He's like, what do you want? She's like, I don't know. And he's like, all right, put 100,000.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, mashallah. and he's like, yeah, that's no problem. Right. But those are two extremes. Like most of what I've seen has been really like where a person's at in their career. It's gone between say 7,000 to 21,000. I think it's important with mahar also that, and I've talked about this on Twitter in the past, a few people misunderstood what I was saying. I was not saying that mahar is like a like some form of ongoing maintenance, right? Or like a salary. No, what I was saying is that if a man has potential for upward mobility, right? And you stipulate an amount, then he can pay that over time. It's better for him to like be paying on that monthly, but the mahar has to be like a certain amount. It can't be open-ended. It can't be, I'm going to get 10% of your yearly earnings. That's not allowed because that's indeterminate. And you can't contract for something that's indeterminate. You can only contract for something that will be determined upfront or by the market. So, my point with that is that like a man can like pay some and then pay off the rest over time. But my greater point in that is that women need to become wiser about what they do with that money. Because in my work of financial advisory and planning, what I've seen is that women become very, very giving once they get money. Once they get money through mahar or they get money through inheritance. And they want to spend it on their family and they want to buy nice things for people. And that's great. But if you're not doing something for yourself, you're going to resent those people later on in life. So it's really important to say, like, even the men, if you know that maybe her family likes to spend, you say, okay, I'll give you the 10,000 that you're asking for as a mahar. But the condition is that, this year I put 7,500 of that into a Roth IRA for you. And then I'll pay you the rest over the next year. Right. So now I've got, one payment of 7,500 and then 10 payments of $250 a month for the next year. Now she's completed that 10,000 in a retirement account as contributions that are going to grow. And by the time, I've done some calculations, that 10 grand, if you put it in when you got married in your mid 20s, by the time you're in your 40s, that could be like $80,000, $90,000 just by putting it in, say, like amount of mutual funds.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to think longer term and wiser about what you're doing with your money, because that's one of the purposes of it. Right.
I think we have a few more minutes left. I think we're going to try to end, inshallah, in the next 5 to 10 minutes. I have a question here. When can a woman ask for divorce if marital issues have started to affect her mentally and the man is not willing to put in the necessary efforts to solve the problems after involving mediator?
Yeah. So when can she ask for a khula? After they've involved the mediator?
Yes.
I mean, she can literally ask at any time. The question that she has to ask herself is ethically and morally, is she asking for the right reason?
Hmm.
So the Prophet ﷺ said, أيما امرأة طلبت من بعدها طلاقا أو خلعا من غير ما سبب لم ترح رائحة الجنة. Any woman that asks from her husband divorce or khula without any valid reason, she will not smell the scent of paradise. So you have to, what that means is, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to ask. What it means is that you need to do the what they call the not dissertation. What's the word I'm looking for?
Dissolution?
No, not dissolution. Not dissent. It's a word with D and S in it. It's the discernment.
Hmm.
So there's actually therapy out there, discernment therapy. It's not marriage therapy. It's not marriage counseling. It's not divorce counseling.
Hmm.
It's discernment counseling. It's basically somebody will walk you through making the decisions, because what has become in vogue is that the majority of divorces are being initiated by women, both in the Muslim community and without.
Mm-hmm.
And those women are listening to their miserable married friends who aren't brave enough to ask for a divorce, or their miserable divorced friends who want company. And many times those issues could have been worked out.
Hmm.
And you're not thinking through the pros and the cons. Now, I'm not saying that every divorce has to be every marriage has to be forever. It's not, you should not be. If you're in an abusive situation, if you're in an unbearable situation, Allah has given an out for both men and women. But you should be doing the proper discernment and thought through it. So if you've gone through a mediator, the mediator, and this is where I think a lot of people in the community mistake, the mediator's role is not to make a decision for you.
Mm-hmm.
The mediator's role is to say, I think you all can solve this. Now you need to work it out. Like, they're not going to do the work for you. Like the hakamun min ahlihi wa hakamun min ahliha, a mediator from his family and a mediator from her family. There again, that's that essential unit of Islamic polity, the family, saying, guys, for the sake of your own family, you can work this out. You're being stupid, you're being greedy, you're being ridiculous, you're being, you're being reasonable, and that person's wrong, but it can still be worked out. Those are all possibilities. But what I think is that some people, they jump to the idea of mediation being, well, how do I go to the state mediator and they help me divvy it up?
Yeah.
And, a lot of it has to do with those unmet expectations and unspoken expectations and unrealistic ideas about what it means to be divorced. I was sitting with an elder here in Houston one time, and he was telling me how in his community, right? Because we have the Muslim community, and then we have Muslim communities, right? So in his community, he's called in to kind of mediate at times. And he said there was a case where he couldn't get it through to the woman that it was a bad situation for her to try and go forward with divorce. And all of her friends were telling him, no, your husband's a doctor. He owns an office. He has 10, 15 employees. He's got to be a millionaire. Look at the house you guys have. And a lot of people don't realize is you can live a very high level of a high standard of living if you have a certain cash flow. The moment you destroy that cash flow, you destroy the standard of living. So, she took him to, when the court finally, she refused everything. She refused the community mediator, the legal mediator. She wanted to go to court. She went to court. When the judge announced the award that she would get, it was something like $50,000. And she was like, how? And the judge himself was like, ma'am, like, we went through all of the finances, all of the money, and this whole time we were asking you guys to go to marital therapy, to go to mediation. You refused. The impression was you knew what you were doing. This is what you will get out of this, because he will have to sell everything, liquidate, pay off debts, so on and so forth. And then she refused, and then she like, oh, I want to pull the case, or she didn't want to go forward with the divorce. So it was a very sad situation, because she forced herself into something based upon what other people were telling her and not making an informed decision herself. So my advice to the sister asking this is, if you've gone through mediation, what did the mediator try to do? Was the mediator simply telling you, you're unreasonable and nothing, or was the mediator giving you resources for help? And then did you act on those resources? Because what I found with a lot of couples is they'll say, well, my wife never wanted to do anything. My husband never wanted to take action. Oh, fine. But as an individual, did you go and take action? Because if you want to change the dance, right? Metaphor, people don't like this metaphor in the Muslim community sometimes, right? But, it takes two to tango. And if you want to change the dance, you simply have to, move. You simply have to switch your footwork. If you want to be, if you want to, I don't know, be in the flow of things of tawaf and get out, you got to walk in a different direction. You're gonna go to Zamzam. You're gonna have to take a right after the Maqam Ibrahim. If you want that to happen, then the person who's walking with you or dancing with you will choose whether their feet follow your feet. But if you don't take an initiative and all you're doing is living in a rut, then don't expect much from them either. And a brother said this to me, is a really beautiful statement. He said, love is not what you give when things are easy. He said, love is being there in the most difficult of times, despite the pain, despite being hurt. Now, he said that he'd actually, he and his wife did not stay married, but they didn't also have this explosive divorce where everything just ended horribly, because they knew that in order to do something with ihsan, right? فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. You either hold on to each other with one another in good, or you release each other with excellence. And so I guess my answer to the sister is, khuda is valid for you if you have a valid reason. You need to do the discernment work. You need to think through the idea of it. You need to talk to other people and get advice, not from people that have a vested interest in being miserable with you, because that happens a lot. But from people that are elder to you, that have been in long-lasting marriages, that can tell you, you're getting the 7-year itch, or that's normal. That happens when you've been married for 5 years. That's normal. What happens when you've been married for 10 years, right? One thing that my mother said to me, which I found really profound, is she said that the love of your spouse at the beginning of the marriage will never be the same. I'm sorry. She said the love of your spouse at 30 years of marriage will not be the same as the love of your spouse at the beginning of the marriage, because your love will change with the changing of your life. And unless you learn to love brand new, you will be miserable. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, when your father and I had you, we loved you and we love each other. But my love after having a child, the love that I give my husband is not going to be the same as the love that I give my child. And it's not going to be the same that a love that I used to give him before, when he was the only thing that I loved in my life. And so some people see that, and they think, oh, I don't love him anymore. I don't love her anymore. No, you love them. You just also have other outlets for that love. So you have to you have to be able to manage that love more, to be like to shepherd that love in a way that's beneficial to the flock. Everyone, each of you is a shepherd, and each of you will be asked about his flock.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So as we wrap up, alhamdulillah, this is an idea that we had, that we wanted to get an idea from the community, from the audience, as to what type of topics and questions that you all have as it relates to nikah and marriage in general. And so, we're thinking about starting perhaps a monthly series. We're not sure if we're going to kind of have an open Q&A like this, or kind of have a topic by topic discussion on a monthly basis, or some other frequency. So if there's any, questions or feedback, or any topics that you all are interested in, feel free to message us at the Nikah Masterclass. Our Instagram is probably the most active. Then you can message us there, leave comments on these videos that you are part of. But with that, Shaykh Joe, anything to end, or any other comments or questions that you thought it'd be necessary to kind of end with?
Yeah, I think let's keep the conversation going. I love to hear from everyone. Like, send us not just the topics that you wanted, or the questions that you have, but like, hey, we'd love to hear more about, XYZ, right? We'd love for you all to host, different experts in different things. Like, I think there's a lot more that we could be doing. And making that a reality. We want to be able to give you all quality information, but also be able to cater to what is most important to you. So we'd love to hear from all of you about how we can make that happen.
Jazakumullahu khairan to all of the participants, and Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Joe, for your time and for your knowledge.
Absolutely.
And
Barakallah feek for yours as well. We appreciate you, Shaykh Naveed. Allah bless you. And everyone, keep us in your dua. Remember, we're going into some of the most blessed days of the year, the first 10 days of the Hijjah. Remember to make lots of takbir and tasbih and tahleel. Make lots of dhikr and takbir. And remember that there's, no better actions in any day of the year than that are done in these 10 days, right? Except for a person that goes out to fight in the path of Allah and returns with nothing, right? So these are the special times of the year where the mercy of Allah comes down, where we should be diligent in making dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of dua, make us from the people of tawheed, make us from the people of righteousness, who are righteous to our spouses and have spouses that are righteous to us, that join each other in the righteousness of Allah and in the pleasure of Allah. And may Allah, for all of you who are not married, may Allah, expedite that for you. Ameen. For all of you that are married, may Allah increase the love in your marriages. And for all of you that are seeking forgiveness, keep us in your dua, and we will do the same for you.
Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.